Well, the U.S. has also been trying to broker a diplomatic deal between Israel and Hamas with the help of Egypt and Qatar. But negotiations have hit a wall, with many seeing little hope of a negotiated solution. Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
After 12 months of suffering, hope for a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas has been all but reduced to rubble. Israeli attacks on Gaza continue, and now their focus is on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Speaking to the recent United Nations General Assembly, US President Joe Biden said the world has a responsibility to make sure an attack such as October 7th never happens again.
I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war.
There have been pauses in fighting over the year and more than 100 hostages freed.
Egypt continues to be an indispensable partner in pursuing a ceasefire in Gaza.
But despite US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's many visits to the region and calls and conferences with regional players, among them Egypt, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, there are major hurdles to a peace deal.
There are several things. One is that you can say that both Hamas leadership and Israeli leadership had advanced demands for any possible ceasefire in ways that would require the other party to capitulate completely. And so that was a non-starter for both parties.
The US gives more than $3 billion in military aid to Israel every year. And in April, lawmakers agreed on a supplemental $14.5 billion. Washington has also given $600 million in humanitarian aid to Palestinians since October 7th, but suspended support for the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency after Israel accused it of having ties to Hamas. The agency was independently reviewed, and 15 of 16 donor states resumed funding without the US. More than 200 aid workers have been killed over the last year.
We need respect for international humanitarian law on top of the obvious ceasefire and the safe return of the hostages. My boss, Philippe Lazzarini, he said something in the early days of the conflict, and I continue to come back to it because it was really true. October 7th was a horrific act, a war crime. But we cannot respond to the killing of innocent civilians by killing more innocent civilians.
Over the last year, relations between Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the US President have become strained. Biden has said Israel is not doing enough to get a deal to release hostages, that civilians need to be better protected, and there needs to be a two-state solution.
There are leverages that the U.S. has, and of course it uses those leverages to pressure Israel as well. Again, legitimate. Does it make the war prolonged? Yes. Is it making Israel's life more difficult? Yes. But that's part of the relationship, an extraordinarily close and important relationship. And I would love to say that it would be the same no matter who would be elected. And quite frankly, I'm not a prophet. I don't know what will become of the relationship. I just know that we need to do everything in our power to maintain it, to strengthen it, to work it, because it's key to maintaining a kind of a coalition of non-radical, stable, stability-seeking countries.
The Pentagon has increased its military presence in the Middle East to 40,000 forces and 12 warships to protect allies and prevent more attacks in the region. Washington has introduced sanctions on some extremist West Bank settlers with US and Israeli nationality. But a looming US presidential election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump could complicate matters even further.
Netanyahu is very clear that he wants Trump to win in 40 days. And consequently, he is reluctant to give the Biden-Harris administration anything that looks like a victory. And so, will there be a compromise? Will there be a ceasefire deal? Well, if you buy that argument, then certainly not anytime in the next couple of months.
President Joe Biden has said that a full-scale war is not in anyone's interests. But rather than getting close to brokering a deal, military action continues, with violence escalating in recent weeks. And it's the trapped hostages and suffering civilians who are paying the highest price. Caroline Malone, CNA, Washington.